Feels like my life is a constant Dunning-Kruger effect. I was sitting in an office waiting for my appointment today and just scrolling on Wikipedia and reading into some of the subcategories of learning and how deep it goes. It's so deep. It's enormous. It always seems really simple and small until you start getting into the weeds. You start gaining some knowledge of the field, the subject of the skill, and then you realize, oh my gosh, this is just the tip of the iceberg. If even that. Anyway, let's continue with Make It Stick. It's a slow burn, but I think the method we're using and applying to make it stick could be potentially very, very, very effective for learning. So, yesterday we completed chapter 1. Before I get into reviewing what I read yesterday, what I'm going to go ahead and do is go ahead and pull up Anki and see if we have any flashcards to study. And we have one. How do the authors define learning and make it stick? The authors define learning as a multi-step process, one in which you intake new information, synthesize it and encode it and store it into memory, and then when you're presented with new novel situations in which this information that you've learned or memorized or encoded in the past is relevant, you can pull it out of your brain and use it in novel situations. Cool. So the next time we'll see that is in 14 days now. Okay. All right. There's Anki. What did we read yesterday? Okay. We finished chapter 1. And finishing chapter 1, we read the takeaway, the final section. And I'm sure we read part of the previous section as well, testing dipstick versus learning tool. Let's start there. So testing dipstick versus learning tool. We read a bit of that the day before about why people don't like testing, because they see it as a measurement tool, not as a tool for learning. But we went ahead and looked at learning as potentially, hey, what if this is just retrieval? And testing and retrieval are the same thing. They're synonymous, right? Both are pulling things out of the brain, and both are using information you've learned, or attempting to at least. Okay? So that would be the relationship between retrieval and testing. At this point, I see them as essentially the same thing, except for testing is usually seen as more high stakes and more formal, and retrieval is seen as lower stakes and less formal. That'd be the big difference I see between retrieval and testing. So we already know retrieval is super effective at leading to brain restructuring, the actual structures in the brain growing, shrinking, reorganizing in order to update and reconsolidate the information that you have retrieved. Testing has 2 benefits. The first is that strong reconsolidation of the memory and restructuring of the brain. The second is it reveals weaknesses. And so it shows you where you need to pay more attention to in order to build up your skill in those weak areas. So it increases your metacognition and increases your ability to assess your own skill level. Okay, and those are the 2 big benefits of testing, the 2 major benefits, and the relationship between testing and retrieval. And then we looked at a study where basically they compared low stakes quizzes versus reviews, and found that low stakes quizzes led to much, much higher average grades. We looked at the pilot, Matt Brown, and how his employer every 6 months makes him get on the simulator and take a test to make sure that he's still sharp on these maneuvers and procedures in case of emergencies. And I think that pretty much sums up the testing dipstick versus learning tool. And then the takeaway is basically that we, as most people, we misunderstand learning largely because techniques that we use lead to illusions of knowing, illusions of competence, and also poor metacognition, poor metacognition meaning we assess our skills inappropriately, often inflating what we think, how good we think we are, and how much we know, because these illusions of knowing that stem from the study techniques such as mass practice and rereading, and reviewing notes, etc. And there are evidence-based techniques that will be covered in this book, including varied practice, interleave practice, retrieval practice, and potentially elaboration, attempting things before being taught them, self-quizzing and finding the big underlying points, as well as others that will be addressed throughout this book. And so, did we get everything? Yes. Oh, forgot that. I'm not going to read it all. Regular self-quizzing. Shooting an azimuth. Okay. 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 Yep. Cool. All right. So, all that we forgot or missed was basically one of the best study techniques one can utilize is self-quizzing regularly because it, like I said, is retrieval practice, but it also shoots the azimuth or reshoots the azimuth, basically recalibrating your compass, recalibrating your assessment of your own skill level. And the other thing that I kind of forgot to say was learning is an iterative process that requires us to revisit things we've learned in the past and re-update, reconsolidate our understanding and knowledge, given our new understanding in our new light. There it is. Chapter 1, and now we're going to answer today any remaining questions I have that I posed at the beginning of the chapter. And then we're gonna do a ChatGPT quiz and see how that works, because hey, why not? Let's do a quiz and see if ChatGPT, kind of as a test of ChatGPT, if it's, because I'm pretty certain I learned this chapter pretty well, so I'll be in a good position to disagree with ChatGPT's responses and quiz in general. So, when learning a motor skill, should I mass practice in order to initially learn? If so, when do I say I've learned it and transition into practice, interleave, space, and varied? Well, actually, this has not been answered in Make It Stick has not been answered, but according to Andrew Huberman, I believe, according to Andrew Huberman, he says, yes, you should mass practice a motor skill in order to learn it quickly. When do I say I've learned it and transition into practice? Probably when I can play it at full speed correctly, occasionally. Can play it at full speed correctly, occasionally. All right. Okay. That was kind of off topic, but what is the optimal speed for learning? Example, how fast should I go through a book? That's a bigger picture question we've not answered. I guess I would say right now I could answer depends on goals. Depends on goals. Exposure to new ideas or mastery of material. Or somewhere in between. Or something in between. Or other. Okay. Cool. Is all retrieval practice testing and vice versa? That is retrieval practice a synonym for testing? Like I already answered this. As of now, testing and retrieval practice are very, very similar. Testing seems more formal and with an answer key. Versus retrieval seems more or less formal or more informal, less formal, and potentially without an answer key. Okay. Learning is misunderstood. Can you make in this book empirical? So this was just the outline of the chapter. Chapter 1 outline. Okay. And then, why do the authors claim learning is misunderstood? Confused familiarity and memorizing words with learning / mastery of underlying principles. Use learning techniques that lead to illusions of knowing, poor metacognition. I think that's a pretty good summary. Is exposure worthless for learning? If it seems so, if exposure is referring to passive reading, passive sensory information. I would also put in unconnected. Unconnected / meaningless. If you passive read something and it actually is structured in a logical English sense and you have some understanding of what the ideas are being conveyed, I don't think that's worthless for learning. They were using a study that was like just random words really having no meaning, and so that exposure when you read that had no effect on future learning. But if you read something passively without using active recall or thinking about it, well, if you have a big picture of how this fits into the big picture, surely I think it's not going to be worthless. Okay? Exposure is passive sensory information. Passive sensory information or passive reading that is unconnected or meaningless. Okay. Tolving 1960 experiment. Tolving 1960, this is reading exposure to meaningless words prior. Meaningless word exposure experiment. How and why do people misunderstand learning? Poor metacognition from study techniques. Confuse familiarity and fluency with knowledge. Confuse rote memorization with conceptual understanding, or just mastery. Understanding/mastery. Because understanding, because for mastery you need both some rote, but you need conceptual understanding as well. What are the main points, big ideas of this chapter? Central argument of the book, 14 claims. Central argument of the book meaning learning is an acquired skill, and that the most effective learning techniques according to science is often misunderstood, or not misunderstood, is often counterintuitive. How the authors define learning. What else we got? How and why people understand. How and why people misunderstand. Understand learning. Approaching learning from evidence-based approach. Okay, that's two more big ideas from the chapter: how and why people misunderstand learning, and approaching learning from an evidence-based approach. Anything else? Testing, dipstick versus learning tool. Testing and retrieval. Testing as more than a measurement tool. Much more than a measurement tool. Cool. Why is knowledge not sufficient? Right? We also need conceptual understanding, which is kind of knowledge, in order to apply creatively. That's all right. I would say, another big idea is knowledge versus creativity, potentially. If knowledge is referring to like information, rote information or facts or pieces of information of that nature, I would consider conceptual understanding as knowledge as well, but maybe the authors are not. Okay. All right. That's how you do it, guys. Chapter 1 in the books. Now let's do our ChatGPT quizzes. And I'm going to try something cool here. I'm going to actually put the screen, I'm going to record the screen, and it's going to cost me a little more effort for the editing, but I'll do my quiz on the screen share for this video. And also, I only got 6 minutes left, so we'll probably have to do some more of this tomorrow. But let's go ahead and do this. All right, ChatGPT, let me open this up before I share my screen, in case I've got confidential information that I'm too lazy to clean up right now. Okay, here we go. All right, folks. Screen share. Let's try it again. Screen share. All right, one more time. How do I do this again? No. Oh no. Oh no. All right. All right, there goes a minute of my quiz time. All right. That's right. All right, here we are. We are screen recording now, I believe. Let me confirm this. Yep, we are. Okay. Sorry. Now we are. Hello guys. Let's do this. All right. So we're gonna go into my learning system, and I'm gonna say, I just completed chapter 1 of Make It Stick. I want you to give me a few questions for recall and retention and learning. Okay. Vary them in difficulty from super easy to expert / PhD. Okay. Just 5 questions for today. All right. Great move. Finishing chapter 1 and Make It Stick. Let's simplify it and stretch your retention with a spectrum of 5 questions from warm up to brain buster. Brain buster. All right, super easy. What's the main idea of chapter 1 in your own words? People misunderstand learning due to using learning techniques that lead to poor metacognition, inaccurate assessment of own abilities / knowledge. That's really super easy. Come on. I could probably spend a lot more time, but we got 3 minutes left, so we're going to move. Why is rereading and highlighting considered less effective than, for long-term learning according to the authors? Rereading and highlighting lead to less effortful and lead to familiarity and illusions of knowing. The less difficult, less effortful practice leads to shallow, if at all, shallow memories, if memories at all. Plus, we're running low on time here. Rereading and highlighting are less effortful. There is also no connection or elaboration or synthesis of the information occurring consciously. That's good enough. 3. Application level. Describe a situation from your own life where you used passive learning strategies. How might you revise that approach now? In the past, I thought that just reading a book cover to cover would lead to mastery of material. Now I use active recall and other techniques techniques such as spaced reps, mind maps, elaboration, teaching, active recall, I already said recall, self-quizzing, identifying the underlying big ideas in order to gain longer term mastery of the material. Okay. Synthesis / comparison. Compare and contrast retrieval practice with reviewing notes. How do their impacts on memory differ mechanistically? Man, we're going to go over time, I guess. Compare and contrast retrieval practice with reviewing notes. Nah, actually, save this one for tomorrow. 5. Save this one for tomorrow. I want to give these ones full effort, and we're past time already. So let's see what feedback. Excellent recall and articulation. Here's feedback of my question. Main idea solid. Your phrasing captures a core theme. People think they're learning effectively when they're not, due to illusions of competence. Tightly compressed. Okay, summarize the. It always does this shit of compression. All right, it's fine. I don't need to do that right now. Rereading versus learning, sharp and specific. You correctly noted that rereading / highlights feel fluent, but don't require retrieval, elaboration, or encoding connections, especially good call out, if memories at all. What cognitive bias might be at play when people prefer rereading? What is that bias? Is this the ease bias or something? Cognitive ease? I don't think that's something else. Personal application, great transfer. You reflected well on past habits and now apply multiple evidence-based techniques, active recall, spacing, elaboration, teaching, etc. That's textbook durable learning, strategy adaptation. Next level task, just how your learning durability improves with these techniques. Okay. Well, sir. Okay. How would you grade 1 through 3? A-? Bitch, what? Clear, articulate, and well phrased. You hit the essence. Misunderstood learning methods are flawed. Self-assessment. Slightly zoomed in on metacognition. Chapter 1 also emphasized counterintuitive nature of effective learning. Okay. Alright. Effortful retrieval feels harder but works better, which could be foregrounded more. Okay. Effortful strategies, though uncomfortable, produce longer lasts. Okay. Alright. Yeah, I only gave half of the coin. I would agree. A. You nailed both cognitive mechanisms, illusion of knowing, and behavioral exploration. Low effort, shallow processing. Bonus for noting no elaboration / is this occurs. This shows excellent understanding of why fluent does not equal durable. Minor push. You could enrich it slightly with terminology like mass practice or reference fluency bias. Reference fluency bias. I guess that's the bias they're talking about. I don't think that was covered word for word in the text, but I know what it's referring to, I believe. But even without that, it's an A grade. All right, personal reflection. This is ideal application. You contrast old versus new strategies, show real shifts in technique, and name specific tools. Okay, this shows you've already doing what the book advocates, learning that sticks. Nothing to proof your gold standard answer. Gold standard answer! All right, average grade A. You're not just remembering, you're applying, compressing, and integrating. That's mastery behavior. Let's keep the heat on with tomorrow's deeper questions. All right. That's it for today. Oh, snap. Hold up. Can I crop this? I don't think there's anything confidential in there. All right. That's it for today, folks. Bye-bye.